Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. If someone had asked me when things started going wrong, I wouldn't have pointed to the day I caught my wife cheating. I'd have pointed to the month before that. My name is Walter, and for 12 years, Rachel had been my partner in everything. We had a good life. We weren't rich, but we had a comfortable home, a 7-year-old son named Mason, steady jobs, and a routine that worked. At least, that's what I believed. Then Rachel started changing. It wasn't one big thing. It was 100 little things. She stopped leaving her phone on the kitchen counter. It went everywhere with her, even when she walked to the laundry room. If it buzzed, she'd glance at the screen, smile for half a second, and lock it before I got close enough to see it. At dinner, she'd drift off in the middle of conversations. "You okay?" I asked one evening. She looked up like I'd interrupted a dream. "Yeah, just tired." "You've been tired for 3 weeks." She forced a small smile. "Work's been busy." I nodded, but I didn't believe it. The distance kept growing. She stopped reaching for my hand when we watched movies. Goodnight kisses became quick pecks. Even simple conversations felt rushed, like she had somewhere else she'd rather be. I noticed it all. I just didn't say much. I've never believed in accusing someone without proof. Once you throw an accusation out there, you can't take it back. If I was wrong, I'd damage my own marriage. If I was right, the truth would show itself sooner or later. So I watched. I listened. I remembered. Friday afternoon, Rachel walked into my home office carrying an overnight bag. "My mom called," she said. "She's been having trouble with a few things around the house. I thought I'd take Mason over for the weekend and help her out." I looked up from my laptop. "You want me to come?" She shook her head. "You've got work Monday morning. There's no point making the trip." That made sense. Mason came running into the room with his backpack hanging halfway off one shoulder. "Dad, Grandma said she's making pancakes tomorrow." I laughed. "Then you'd better save me some." "I will." Rachel smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "We'll be back Sunday evening." I stood up, carried their bags to the SUV, and helped Mason buckle his seatbelt. Rachel climbed into the driver's seat. "You sure you'll be okay by yourself?" she asked. "I think I can survive 2 days." She laughed softly. "I'll call when we get there." "I'll be here." She leaned over and gave me a quick kiss before starting the engine. I watched them pull out of the driveway until the SUV disappeared around the corner. The house became quiet. Too quiet. I spent the rest of Friday catching up on work, ordered takeout for dinner, and watched a baseball game without anyone asking for the remote. It felt strange. Not bad. Just different. Looking back, that was the last evening my life felt ordinary. I just didn't know it yet. Saturday morning started like any other. I made coffee, mowed the lawn, and spent an hour cleaning out the garage. It was the kind of weekend where nothing seemed important. Around noon, I was putting a ladder back against the wall when I heard someone call my name. "Walter." I turned and saw my neighbor, Calvin, walking over from across the street with a bottle of water in his hand. Calvin had lived on our street for years. He wasn't nosy, but he noticed things most people overlooked. "Morning, Walter." "Morning." He looked toward my house. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Did you have somebody over Thursday afternoon?" I frowned. "Thursday?" "Yeah. There was a black SUV parked in your driveway for quite a while." My stomach tightened. Thursday. I hadn't been home. "What time?" "Around 3, I think." That was right in the middle of my workday. "Did you see who it was?" "Just a guy. Tall. Wore a baseball cap. Walked up to your front door." "Did he leave?" Calvin nodded. "About an hour later. I happened to look over when he drove away." I kept my face neutral. "You didn't recognize him?" "No. I figured maybe he was a friend or someone stopping by." "Maybe." Calvin shrugged. "Anyway, I just thought I'd ask." "I appreciate it." He headed back across the street. I stood there for a few seconds. Thursday, 3 o'clock. I knew exactly where I'd been. At work. Then I remembered something I hadn't thought about in months. The doorbell camera. I walked inside, picked up my phone, and opened the app. The recordings were all there. I scrolled back to Thursday. Around 2:50 p.m., a motion notification appeared. I tapped it. A black SUV pulled into my driveway. The engine shut off. A man stepped out. He wore sunglasses, a gray jacket, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He walked toward my front door with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where he was going. Before he even reached the doorbell, the front door opened. Rachel was already standing there. She smiled. Not the polite smile she gave delivery drivers, not the smile she gave neighbors. This smile was different, comfortable, familiar, like she'd been expecting him. She stepped aside without saying a word. The man smiled back and walked straight inside. Rachel glanced quickly up and down the street before closing the door behind him. The recording ended. I stared at my phone. Then I played it again. And again. Each time, another detail jumped out at me. She hadn't looked surprised. She hadn't asked who he was. She'd opened the door before he even had the chance to knock. That meant she knew exactly when he was arriving. I opened the next recording. Nearly 2 hours later, the front door opened again. The man walked out first. Rachel followed him onto the porch. They stood close together. He said something that made her laugh. Then she reached over and brushed something off the front of his jacket. It wasn't a casual gesture. It was natural, comfortable. The kind of thing you do without thinking when you're close to someone. He smiled at her one last time before getting into the SUV. Rachel stayed on the porch until he drove out of sight. Then she went back inside and closed the door. That was the last recording until I came home from work later that afternoon. I leaned back in my chair. I could have called her. I could have demanded answers. But one recording wasn't enough. People can explain almost anything when you only have one piece of the story. No. If there was something going on, I wanted the whole truth. Rachel wasn't coming home until Sunday evening. That gave me an entire day, and I knew exactly how I was going to use it. I was out of the house by 8 o'clock Sunday morning. I drove to an electronics store on the other side of town where nobody knew me. I didn't need anyone asking questions or making small talk. I bought 4 small wireless cameras. They were simple, motion-activated, high-definition, easy to hide, and connected to the same app as my doorbell camera. The cashier smiled as he scanned the boxes. Adding a little more security? Something like that. I paid, loaded everything into my truck, and drove straight home. The first camera went on a bookshelf in the living room, tucked behind a row of family photos. The second went above the kitchen cabinets where it blended into the shadow near the ceiling. The third faced the hallway that led to our bedroom. The last one took the longest. I mounted it inside the bedroom, hidden inside a decorative wooden clock that sat on top of the dresser. The lens was almost impossible to notice unless you knew exactly where to look. When I finished, I tested each camera from my phone. Living room, kitchen, hallway, bedroom. Every angle was clear. Every entrance was covered. I stood in the middle of the living room and looked around. Nothing seemed different. That's exactly how I wanted it. By late afternoon, everything was ready. Around 6:30, Rachel's SUV pulled into the driveway. This time, I watched it live through the doorbell camera before walking outside. Mason jumped out first. "Dad!" He ran over and wrapped his arms around me. "Hey, buddy, you promised we'd build the racetrack today." "I remember." Rachel carried 2 bags toward the porch. "My mom says thanks again for letting me stay an extra day." "No problem." She needed the help. "I'm glad you could be there." Our eyes met for a second. If she felt guilty, she hid it well. She looked exactly like she always had. Calm, relaxed, comfortable, as if Thursday afternoon had never happened. Inside, Mason disappeared into the living room to unpack his toys. Rachel walked into the kitchen. "I brought you some pie. I'll have some later." She smiled. "You survived without us?" "Barely," she laughed. "I knew you'd miss us." I did miss Mason. She raised an eyebrow. "Only Mason?" I looked her straight in the eyes. "I figured you'd know I missed you too." She smiled again, but it looked forced this time. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I didn't. Dinner was ordinary. Mason talked about fishing with Grandpa. Rachel filled in the details. I asked questions. I smiled. I laughed when everyone else laughed. If anyone had been watching us, they would have thought we were a normal family sharing a normal meal. But every time Rachel looked at me, I wondered if she was remembering Thursday, or if she believed she'd gotten away with it. Monday morning came. I left for work, like always. Before pulling out of the driveway, I kissed Mason on the head. Rachel stood beside the front door holding a coffee mug. "Have a good day." "You too." She waved as I drove away. About 20 minutes later, I parked 3 streets over instead of going to the office. I opened the camera app. Then I called my manager. "David, I'm going to be a little late this morning. Everything okay?" "Yeah, I just need to take care of something at home." "Take your time." I hung up. Then I waited. At 10:16, my phone buzzed. Motion detected at the front door. I opened the live feed. The same black SUV rolled slowly into my driveway. The same man stepped out. Rachel opened the front door before he reached it. This time, She didn't even pretend to wait. She walked straight to him. She wrapped both arms around his neck. Then she kissed him. Not a quick kiss, not something that could be explained away. A real kiss, the kind reserved for someone you wanted. The two of them disappeared inside my house together. I watched the living room camera come alive. Rachel laughed as she took his hand. The man looked around the room like he belonged there. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't worried. That told me everything. This wasn't their first time. I switched to the hallway camera. They walked toward the bedroom. Rachel looked back once, not because she'd heard something, but almost out of habit. Then she closed the bedroom door behind them. I stared at the screen for several seconds. Then I calmly picked up my truck keys. I didn't start the engine, not yet. Instead, I pressed one button, save recording, then another, back up to cloud storage. I wasn't going to make a move until every second of that footage existed in more than one place. Because from that moment on, I wasn't acting like an angry husband. I was building a case, and I wasn't done yet. I didn't drive home that morning. That would have been the easy decision. Instead, I stayed exactly where I was until the recordings finished uploading. Then I watched every second. The living room camera showed Rachel pouring coffee while the man made himself comfortable on my couch. He didn't ask where anything was. He already knew. That told me more than the kiss had. This wasn't a first meeting. It wasn't even a new relationship. He knew my house. He knew where my coffee mugs were. He knew exactly where he belonged. The hallway camera showed them walking toward the bedroom hand in hand. An hour and 43 minutes later, they came back out. Rachel fixed her hair as she walked into the bathroom. The man straightened his shirt and laughed about something. Then they went back into the kitchen like nothing had happened. I stopped watching. I had everything I needed. I drove to my office and worked the rest of the day as if nothing had happened. When I came home that evening, Rachel was making dinner. She smiled. "You're late. Had a lot to finish. I kept your plate warm. Thanks." We sat at the table with Mason between us. He talked about school. Rachel asked him about a spelling test. I listened. Every now and then she'd smile at me. I smiled back. She had no idea I'd watched another man kiss her in my own house less than 8 hours earlier. That night, after everyone went to bed, I copied every recording onto a flash drive, then another one, then an external hard drive. Finally, I uploaded everything to a secure online account. If something happened to my phone or my computer, the evidence would still exist. The next morning, I called a private investigator. His name was Owen. We met at a small diner before work. He slid into the booth across from me. "What can I do for you?" I handed him my phone. "Watch this." He played the doorbell recording first, then the footage from inside the house. When the videos ended, he pushed the phone back across the table. "How long has this been going on?" "I don't know." "You want to find out?" "I want everything." He nodded. "I'll need the man's face." "You have it." "I'll also need a few days." "You've got them." He took a notebook from his jacket. "Any idea who he is?" "None." "Coworker?" "I don't think so." "Friend?" "If he is, I've never met him." Owen closed the notebook. "I'll identify him." "I don't just want a name." "What else?" "I want to know how long they've been seeing each other." He nodded again. "I'll dig into both of them." Before we left, he looked me straight in the eye. "One piece of advice." I waited. "Don't confront your wife yet." "I wasn't planning to." "Good." "Why?" "Because people who think they're safe make mistakes." I stood up. "So let her keep thinking she's safe." 3 days later, Owen called. "I know who he is." I picked up my keys. "Where are you?" "My office." "I'll be there in 20 minutes." When I walked in, Owen already had a folder waiting on his desk. He didn't say anything at first. He simply turned the folder toward me. On the front was a photograph. The second I saw the man's face without the baseball cap and sunglasses, I recognized him. And the truth hit harder than I expected. The man in the photograph wasn't a stranger. His name was Brian Collins. I'd shaken his hand twice. The first time was 6 months earlier when Rachel convinced me to join the local country club for a charity fundraiser. Brian had been one of the event organizers. The second time was at a neighborhood cookout a few weeks later. Back then, he was just another face. Now I knew better. Owen slid the file toward me. "Brian Collins, 42, owns a small financial consulting firm downtown." I flipped through the pages. "Married, 1 daughter, lived about 25 minutes from us." Then I reached the investigator's notes. "They've been meeting for at least 7 weeks, Owen said. "How do you know?" I tracked them for several days. I pulled security footage from two businesses that agreed to cooperate. They've had lunch together more than once. I also photographed them leaving a hotel outside the city. He handed me another envelope. Inside were printed photographs. Rachel, Brian, walking through a hotel parking lot, laughing, holding hands, different clothes, different days, different locations. It wasn't one mistake. It was a relationship. I looked up. Does his wife know? Owen shook his head. As far as I know, she doesn't. Good. I closed the folder. I'm not interested in blowing up anyone's life until mine is legally protected. Owen gave a small nod. That's the right move. The next stop was a divorce attorney. Her name was Linda Brooks. She spent nearly an hour reviewing everything I'd brought. She watched the videos, read the investigator's report, studied the photographs. When she finished, she folded her hands on the desk. You've documented this very well. I wanted facts. You have them. She explained exactly how the process would work. Property, custody, finances, everything. When she asked the question I knew was coming, I answered without hesitation. Do you want to try counseling before filing? No. She studied my face for a second. You answered that quickly. I made my decision the moment another man walked into my house. She nodded. I'll begin preparing the paperwork. As I stood to leave, she said one more thing. Don't tell her yet. I wasn't planning to. The more organized you are before she knows, the smoother this will go. That's exactly what I want. For the next 4 days, I lived the same routine. Breakfast with my son, work, dinner, normal conversations. Rachel acted exactly as she always had. She laughed. She asked about my day. She kissed me goodbye every morning. Every lie came easily to her. I never argued, never accused, never hinted that I knew. Instead, I watched. The cameras caught Brian twice more. Each visit looked almost identical. Rachel greeted him at the door before he knocked. They acted like two people who had stopped worrying about getting caught. That confidence became their biggest mistake. By Friday afternoon, Linda called. The papers are ready. I picked them up on my way home. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Not because of the paper, because of what it meant. That evening, Rachel mentioned something over dinner. My parents called. I looked up. They want Mason to stay with them tomorrow night. That's nice. He misses spending time there. I nodded. So do they. She smiled. I'll drive him over after lunch. I took another bite of dinner and kept my voice steady. Sounds good. Inside, I'd already made my decision. Tomorrow night, for the first time since this started, Rachel and I would be alone. And so would the truth. Saturday afternoon, Rachel packed Mason's overnight bag. He was excited. Grandpa said we're going fishing again. I smiled. Then you'd better catch a bigger one than last time. I will. Rachel zipped up the bag and looked at me. You sure you don't mind? Not at all. She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. I'll drop Mason off and head right back. I looked at Mason. Have fun, buddy. I will, Dad. I watched them pull out of the driveway. 2 hours later, Rachel came back alone, exactly as I'd expected. She walked into the house carrying her purse. Mason's already asking when you're coming over tomorrow, she said. I'll see him then. She smiled. I'm going to change. Rachel. She stopped. We need to talk. Something in my voice made her turn around. She looked at me for a second. What is it? I pointed toward the dining room. Sit down. She frowned but pulled out a chair. I walked into my office and came back carrying a thick folder. I placed it on the table between us. She looked at it. What's this? You'll see. I opened my laptop. The first video filled the screen. The doorbell camera. Thursday afternoon. Brian walking up my front path. Rachel opening the front door before he even reached it. Her smile. The way she stepped aside without a word. The quick glance she made up and down the street before letting him inside. The recording ended. Rachel didn't say a word. I clicked the next file. The living room camera. Brian kissing her. Her arms around his neck. The hallway. The bedroom door closing behind them. The hallway again. Both of them walking out nearly 2 hours later. I closed the laptop. The room was silent. Rachel's face had turned completely white. Her lips moved, but nothing came out. Finally, she whispered, Walter. I looked at her. Go ahead. Tears filled her eyes. I can explain. I shook my head. No, it wasn't. I cut her off. Be careful with your next sentence. She looked down at the folder. I made a mistake. I slid the investigator's report toward her. You made the same mistake for almost 2 months. She didn't touch it. I opened the folder and spread the photographs across the table. The hotel, the restaurants, the parking garage, lunch dates. Every picture had a date, a time, a location. Rachel covered her mouth. Oh my God. No, I said calmly. God had nothing to do with this. She started crying. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did. I was going to end it. When? She couldn't answer. She whispered. I leaned back in my chair. You weren't going to tell me. Her shoulders shook. You thought I'd never check the doorbell camera. She closed her eyes. I forgot it even recorded. I know. Silence filled the room. Then I slid one final document across the table. She looked down. Her eyes widened. Divorce petition. She stared at it for several seconds. You already filed? Yesterday. She looked at me in disbelief. You already decided? I decided the day I watched another man walk into my house. She reached across the table. Walter, please. I stood before she could touch my hand. Our marriage ended before this conversation started. She was crying openly now. We can fix this. No. What about Mason? I'll always be his father. And me? I picked up the folder. You made your choice. I walked toward the front door. Behind me, Rachel called my name one last time. I didn't turn around. There was nothing left to hear. I spent that night at my brother Samuel's house. He opened the front door, took one look at the folder in my hand, and stepped aside. You found out. I did. He didn't ask for details right away. He poured 2 cups of coffee, and we sat on his back porch. After I showed him the recordings, he leaned back in his chair. She really thought she'd get away with that. She thought I'd never look at the doorbell camera. He shook his head slowly. That's a terrible bet. The divorce process moved faster than I expected. Rachel hired an attorney, but there wasn't much to argue about. The evidence spoke for itself. We agreed on shared custody of Mason. That was the only part that mattered to me. Everything else was just paperwork. A week later, I made one more visit. Not to Rachel, to Brian's house. I rang the doorbell. A woman answered. Can I help you? You must be Emily. She nodded cautiously. I am. My name is Walter. Her expression changed the moment she heard it. I think we need to talk. She invited me inside. I didn't waste time. I placed a small envelope on the coffee table. There are photographs in there. She looked confused. And a flash drive. What's on it? The reason I'm getting divorced. She stared at me. I don't understand. You will. I stood before she opened the envelope. I'm sorry. Then I left. I never looked back. A few days later, Owen called me. I figured you'd want to know. What happened? Brian moved out. I wasn't surprised. Rachel called several times over the next month. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she apologized. Once she simply said, I wish I could go back. I answered the same way every time. You can't. Eventually, the calls stopped. A few months later, the divorce was finalized. Rachel and I reached a settlement without going to trial. We sold the house and split the proceeds. We agreed to shared custody of Mason. He spent 1 week with me and 1 week with Rachel. It wasn't the life I'd imagined for my son, but it was the best arrangement we could give him. When I walked out of the courthouse that day, I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt free. Life became quieter. I bought a smaller house across town. Nothing fancy, just enough space for Mason and me. The first weekend he stayed over, we spent the afternoon putting together his new bedroom. When we finished, he smiled. I like it here. So do I. As the sun was setting, I walked outside to finish installing a new doorbell camera beside the front door. Mason watched from the porch. Didn't the old house already have one? It did? Then why do you need another one? I tightened the last screw and stepped down from the ladder. Because sometimes the smallest things end up protecting the biggest parts of your life. He didn't fully understand. One day he probably would. That evening, after Mason had gone to bed, I checked the camera from my phone. The front porch was empty, just the way I liked it. Rachel thought I would never check the doorbell camera. She built her secret around one simple assumption, that I'd install it, forget about it, and never look back. She was wrong. That camera didn't just record a man walking through my front door. It showed me exactly who needed to walk out of my life. And looking back now, pressing play was the best decision I ever made. Thank you for watching.